You already know that working hard isn't enough anymore. You keep telling yourself the world will eventually notice, that your competence will speak for itself, that intelligence, professionalism, consistency, all of it will naturally translate into recognition. But it's not happening, and somewhere inside, you know it won't, not like this. You've watched your idea get ignored in a meeting, only to see someone else repeat it 10 minutes later to enthusiastic agreement. You've watched a one-liner from the right person outperform your most carefully constructed argument. So the questions start circulating. Maybe you need to express yourself better. Choose your words more carefully. Maybe it's how you dress, how you carry yourself, whether people find you interesting the moment you show up. And what's unsettling isn't just the questions themselves, it's how often they appear now. Your status, your presence, whether you register as someone worth listening to. It's consuming your mind in ways it didn't before. Because if effort were truly enough, something would have shifted by now. Doors would have opened. Conversations would flow differently. Opportunities wouldn't require this much convincing, but they do. And that gap between what you deliver and what actually comes back to you keeps widening no matter how hard you push. Which means the problem isn't your work. It's how you're being read before anyone even considers your work. And once that perception settles, everything else you bring becomes invisible. The problem isn't that you're not good enough. The problem is that nobody's waiting around to find out if you are. We grew up believing competence would eventually shine through, that hard work compounds, that consistency builds credibility, that if you just kept delivering, recognition would follow like some natural law of the universe. But that's not how the world actually works anymore. What really happens is brutal and fast. People make automatic judgments almost immediately, form a read on where you fit, and move on. They're not analyzing your resume or tracking your progress. They're scanning for something far more basic. Do you look like someone worth paying attention to? And if that answer comes back no, even subconsciously, everything changes. Suddenly you're explaining when others are simply heard, proving when others are assumed capable, waiting when others walk right through. It's not loud, it's not obvious, nobody announces it, but you feel it everywhere. The extra friction, the subtle resistance, the strange sense that you're operating under different rules than the people around you. And what's devastating is this: the harder you work to overcome it, the more invisible that work becomes, because low status doesn't block effort, it just makes effort irrelevant. In a minute, you'll recognize the exact moment status is assigned. It's not when you show your work. It's when you enter, say your first sentence, and the room decides, signal or noise. You show up early, you stay focused, you handle your responsibilities without anyone needing to remind you. And somehow it still doesn't land. Not because people think you're bad at what you do. Most of them probably don't think about you at all. That's the actual problem. Effort only registers when someone's already paying attention, when they've already placed you in a category that matters to them, when your name carries enough weight that what you accomplish actually sticks in their memory. Without that foundation, you're just there, doing good work that dissolves into the background the moment it's finished. You've probably felt this in small ways that add up. You say something clear in a room full of people, it lands flat. Someone else says something similar 10 minutes later, and suddenly it's brilliant. You send a well-thought-out message. It sits unread for days. Someone with more status sends a one-liner, and responses flood in within the hour. None of this is dramatic. It's not personal attacks or obvious discrimination. It's just a quiet, constant pattern of being overlooked in ways that are hard to call out, but impossible to ignore. And what makes it worse is that working harder doesn't fix it. You double down, thinking maybe you need to be even more reliable, even more thorough. So you do more. You refine your approach. You make yourself indispensable in ways that should be undeniable. But indispensable to whom? If the people making decisions have already filed you under background, your indispensability just means you're a dependable part of the machinery, not someone who gets elevated beyond it. The tragedy isn't that your effort is wasted. It's that your effort is consumed without ever converting into momentum. You're pouring energy into a system that takes everything you give and returns nothing that moves you forward. So, what am I supposed to do? You may be asking yourself. The answer isn't what you want to hear, but it's what you need to understand. People don't wait to hear your arguments before deciding whether they matter. They've already made that call the second you entered the room. It happens faster than you realize. Before you've said a single word, they've read how you carry yourself, how you're dressed, the energy you project, whether your presence feels certain or apologetic. And based on that automatic reading, they've placed you somewhere on an invisible scale that shapes what happens next. If you land high on that scale, your words carry weight. Your ideas get considered seriously. Your silence is interpreted as thoughtfulness. Even your mistakes get framed as understandable lapses rather than signs of incompetence. If you land low, the opposite happens. Your words need more proof. Your ideas get questioned harder. Your silence reads as having nothing to contribute. And your mistakes confirm what people already suspected. Same room, same conversation, completely different treatment. And the most frustrating part? You can say the exact same thing as someone with higher status, and it will land entirely differently. Not because the content changed, but because the perception of who's delivering it changed everything. Status doesn't alter truth. It alters how truth gets received. It's why your requests turn into procedures, why you're spoken to with explanations you didn't ask for, why you feel like you need permission to take up space. And until you understand that this filter exists, you'll keep wondering why your intelligence doesn't translate, why your competence doesn't register, why everything you bring feels like it's being discounted before it even reaches the table. It's not you, it's the lens people are using to interpret you. And that lens was set before you ever opened your mouth. Nothing ever blocks you directly. That's what makes it so difficult to name. You're not being told no. You're not facing outright rejection. Doors aren't slamming in your face. They're just harder to open than they should be. You ask a reasonable question, and suddenly you're getting a longer explanation than necessary, like you needed the basics spelled out. You make a request that should be simple, and it turns into a whole process. Forms to fill out, people to check with, justifications required. Meanwhile, someone else asks for the same thing and gets it handled in 2 minutes. You start noticing how often you have to repeat yourself, how your emails need follow-ups that others don't, how you're expected to provide more context, more credentials, more evidence that you belong in the conversation. It's never openly hostile. Nobody's trying to make your life difficult on purpose. But the resistance is there, subtle, constant, exhausting. Every interaction costs just a little more energy than it does for someone operating from higher status. And over time, those small taxes add up to something crushing. Because the issue isn't effort, it's friction. High-status people move through the world on a frictionless surface. Assumptions work in their favor. Trust is extended by default. Their presence grants them permission to take up space, make demands, expect responsiveness. Low-status people move through a world covered in sandpaper. Every step requires more force. Every request requires more justification. Every move forward demands energy that should have been spent actually progressing, not just proving you deserve to progress. And what's insidious is that this friction is invisible to anyone not experiencing it. People with status don't see it because they've never had to push through it. So when you're exhausted, they assume you're just not trying hard enough. But you are trying. You're trying twice as hard to get half as far. And the system that created that imbalance will never acknowledge it exists. Are you following the point here? Because if it were acknowledged, the entire story we tell ourselves about success would collapse. We need to believe that effort determines outcomes, that merit rises to the top, that if you work hard enough, stay disciplined enough, improve yourself enough, eventually you'll get what you deserve. That narrative keeps everything emotionally manageable. It means success is fair. It means failure is earned. It means the system works. And if you're struggling, it's because you haven't figured out the right formula yet. But the moment you admit that perception overrides competence, that status shapes opportunity, that some people start 10 steps ahead while others start 10 steps behind, the whole framework falls apart. Suddenly, success isn't just about what you did. It's about what you were assumed capable of before you did anything. And failure isn't proof you didn't try hard enough. It's proof the environment never gave your effort a fair chance to convert into results. That's uncomfortable for everyone. For people who succeeded, it raises questions they don't want to answer. How much of this was me, and how much was the system reading me favorably from the start? For people still trying to succeed, it removes the one thing that felt controllable, the belief that more effort will eventually break through. So instead, we keep the narrative simple. Work harder, be better, stay consistent, and when people remain invisible despite doing all of that, we don't question the system, we question them. Maybe they're not presenting themselves well. Maybe they're not confident enough. Maybe they need to network better, speak up more, fix something about how they show up. The problem gets personalized, internalized, and the structural reality that low status creates resistance no amount of individual effort can fully overcome stays conveniently unnamed. Because naming it would mean admitting that the game was never as fair as we pretended it was. And the worst part is, it doesn't even have to be fair to work, so you do what seems logical. You compensate. If people aren't taking you seriously, you explain more. You add context. You make sure there's no possible way they could misunderstand your qualifications or your point. If your presence doesn't command attention, you try to earn it through thoroughness. You over-prepare. You anticipate every question. You arrive with answers before anyone even asks. It feels responsible. It feels like the right move. Are you sure it is the right move? But something strange happens. The more you explain, the less people listen. When someone with high status makes a claim, it's accepted at face value. They can be brief, vague even, and people fill in the gaps favorably. Their confidence is assumed. Their competence is given. When someone with low status makes a claim, they have to build the entire case from the ground up. They explain the background, they justify the reasoning, they preemptively address objections. And every second spent doing that reinforces the very perception they're trying to escape. Because the need to explain signals doubt. The need to justify signals that justification is necessary. The need to prove competence signals that competence isn't assumed. You're not being paranoid. You're reading the room correctly. People do need more convincing from you than they need from others. But by giving them that convincing, you're teaching the system that you're someone who needs to convince. And the cycle deepens. You talk more, but your words carry less weight. You provide more evidence, but it's scrutinized harder. You work twice as hard to demonstrate value, and all people see is someone working hard to demonstrate value, which isn't the same as someone whose value is obvious. This is the trap. Low status makes you behave in ways that confirm low status. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're adapting to an environment that's already made up its mind about you. And adaptation in this case doesn't lead to advancement, it leads to exhaustion. And then the old scenarios pop in your mind. Like a loop, repeating bad experiences, you begin adjusting before anyone even asks you to. You hesitate before speaking up in meetings, running through whether your point is worth the effort it'll take to land it. You soften your language, adding qualifiers and hedges that weren't there before. You minimize your presence, taking up less space, because you've learned that taking up space invites resistance. None of this feels like a conscious decision. It's just practical. Why push when pushing has consistently led nowhere? Why assert yourself when assertion gets met with skepticism? Why take up room when the room has made it clear it doesn't want you there? So you adapt, you shrink, you pre-edit everything you say and do to avoid the friction you've come to expect. And at first, it feels like survival. Like you're just being smart about how you navigate an environment that clearly isn't built for you. But over time, something shifts. The external response stops being external. It becomes internal. You're no longer hesitating because people dismissed you. You're hesitating because you've started dismissing yourself. You're no longer minimizing your presence because others made you feel small. You're doing it because feeling small has become your default. The environment trained you, and now you're enforcing its rules without anyone needing to say a word. This is what low status does when it goes unchecked. It stops being about how others treat you and starts being about how you treat yourself. You internalize the judgment. You anticipate the doubt. You preemptively disqualify your own thoughts before giving anyone else the chance to. And the worst part? You don't even notice it's happening until you catch yourself mid-thought, realizing you've been operating under limitations nobody actually placed on you anymore. You placed them on yourself, because after enough repetition, the external becomes automatic, and automatic becomes invisible. That's when low status stops being situational and starts becoming who you are. Understanding all of this doesn't make you feel better. If anything, it makes things harder for a while. Because as long as you believed the problem was effort, you had something to control. You could work harder, be more prepared, refine your skills. There was always another step to take, another adjustment to make. That belief, even when frustrating, was still comforting. It meant the solution was in your hands. But once you see that the real issue is perception, how you're being read, how status was assigned before you even walked in, that comfort disappears. You can't just effort your way out of a perception problem. You can't outwork a judgment that formed almost immediately. You can't logic someone into seeing you differently when they've already filed you under a category that doesn't update easily. And that realization lands heavy, because it means a lot of what you've been doing, the extra hours, the over-preparation, the constant proving, wasn't moving you forward. It was just keeping you busy inside a box the system had already built around you. That's disorienting. It removes the straightforward narrative you were operating under, but it also removes something else: misplaced self-blame. Once you understand that invisibility isn't a personal failing, that low status is a structural condition rather than a reflection of your worth, the weight shifts. You stop asking what's wrong with you. You start asking what's wrong with how you're being positioned. And that's a completely different question, one that opens different answers. You're not broken. You're not insufficient. You're not missing some essential quality that everyone else has. You're operating in a system that assigned you a position based on factors that had nothing to do with your actual capability. And once you see that clearly, the path forward stops being about fixing yourself. It becomes about changing how you're read. Low status isn't hated. It's just not worth processing. That's the distinction most people miss. You're not being rejected. You're being filtered out before the evaluation even begins. And here's what that means. You don't change outcomes by pouring more energy into the same frame. Doubling your productivity while the world reads you the same way just burns you out faster, because status operates as a trust shortcut. People don't have time to investigate everyone's competence, so they rely on fast signals to decide who's worth their attention. If those signals register you as low priority, everything you do afterward gets processed through that lens, or doesn't get processed at all. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a shortcut. And the system punishes ambiguity, not poverty. It punishes being unreadable in an environment that only rewards what it can decode quickly. So the question stops being, how do I work harder? And becomes, how do I stop being illegible? That's uncomfortable, because it feels like admitting substance doesn't matter as much as surface. But that's not what this is. Substance still matters. Competence still matters. What you bring to the table absolutely matters. The issue is that none of it registers if the frame people are using to evaluate you is set to dismiss or overlook before you've even begun. You're not abandoning depth. You're making sure depth actually has a chance to be seen. You don't need to become fake. You need to stop being unreadable in a system that only rewards what it can process quickly. And once that reading shifts, once people start interpreting your presence differently before you've said a word, everything you were already capable of suddenly starts converting into actual results. Not because you got better, but because people finally started seeing what was always there. You're not being ignored because you lack competence. You're being ignored because competence alone no longer determines attention. Low status isn't who you are. It's how you're being read. And as long as that reading stays the same, effort will keep feeling expensive and progress will keep feeling out of reach. But once you understand that the game isn't about working harder, it's about being read differently, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself for invisibility. You stop pouring energy into strategies that were never designed to move you forward. And you start focusing on what actually shifts outcomes, changing the interpretation before the conversation even begins. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It might mean you've been trying to solve a perceptual problem with effort alone. And once you understand how you're being read, you stop mistaking invisibility for inadequacy. If you've been living inside this friction, don't leave without understanding it. Subscribe if you want more clarity like this, the kind that stops you from blaming yourself. Don't let the world decide your value based on a snap judgment you never consented to.